All right, guys, welcome back to another episode of the Growth by Shawn podcast. I have a return guest here. You may remember Dr. Swart from episode 6. And we're looking at like episode, I believe when this drops, it'll be 123.
Wow.
So we've come a long way, that's for sure. Um, I can bore you with all the letters and everything that Dr. Swart has behind his name and all that good stuff. But I think this conversation is going to be one of the more beneficials, one of the more beneficial ones for myself and everyone we're talking to today, because we're really getting into like character development and who we are as people, not just our careers and health and fitness and all of these different aspects, but a little bit on the deeper side. So, Chris, I'm not sure where you want to start. I've had a couple different ideas, but I think the best way to start is why you decided to reach out when you did, um, and kind of preface what we're going to go into today.
Absolutely. I appreciate it. First things first, as always, thank you, Shawn. I really appreciate the opportunity to come on here and just share a little bit of information about, my story and kind of what I've gone through. Shawn was a student of mine for the listeners at Bridgewater State University, and him and I developed a great relationship. Very good student, always open, full of energy and charismatic. Which I absolutely love, right? And like clearly, as the listeners know, like you're a go-getter,
Mm.
and we always had that connection. So I reached out to you. I don't know, maybe it was about a week ago, week and a half ago, 2 weeks, something like that. And I think as a professor, which some people look at as a solid career, and everything, the foundation is there, and things are going really well. Like life happens, and we all deal with challenges in life, and it all comes in many different shapes and sizes. And for me, my biggest challenge in life has been addiction, and specifically alcoholism. And it's been a challenge of mine for a real long time. And I reached out to you as far as like, hey, let's talk about this and let's normalize this. Let's make this a bigger conversation, not only within the health and fitness industry, which is where I sit. And, in a second, I'll just for the listeners who haven't heard, I'll go over my qualifications briefly. But in general, like, I've spent the vast majority of my career in health and fitness and athletics. And, people turn to me for advice, and they don't understand the struggles that I've gone through behind the scenes. And so, I haven't done a tremendous amount of public discussion about what I've been through and my, specifically my alcoholism. But, knowing that you have had a podcast and we have a previous relationship, I thought this was a really good place to like start the process of kind of coming out publicly, sharing information about what I've been through, what I've learned along the way, what I think potentially could help some other people. But for the most part, like throughout this conversation, the first and most important thing that I want to say is I'm not telling anybody what to do or what not to do. I'm simply just sharing my experience, my perspective, and what I think has helped me along the way. So, sometimes people in this aspect of addiction or recovery kind of get into you need to do this and you need to do that, and that's never going to be my style. I just simply want to share my experience, and hopefully that my story can resonate with not only anybody, but specifically people in the fitness industry, or anybody that is struggling or has struggled, that simply just doesn't know where to turn and doesn't know what to do. And I'm just trying to normalize it. I think that's the biggest thing, the most important thing I can say.
Yeah. Um, I mean, I've had my own I was really happy when you were able to just reach out to me specifically. It was very honorable for myself, um, because I've had my own issues and my own struggles, which I'm sure that we'll get into as well, where even um during different classes that I had with you, showing up and drinking before class, or convincing my buddies to leave class at 8 a.m. to go and get breakfast, and then I'm convincing them to go and play beer pong with me at 9 o'clock in the morning. you know? So this conversation I think is going to be a great back and forth of just like normalizing different things and our own struggles collectively. So when did just walk us through this timeline here of when did you first get introduced to alcohol and when did you start to realize that, hey, you know what, maybe this is something that I need to look a little bit deeper into?
Yeah, I mean, I'll go up to, so what I'll do right now is I'll talk about the beginning
Mhm.
all the way up until I realized there was an issue, and then
Mm.
I'll stop there and then we can
Yeah.
kind of continue with, what's happened. But, so I grew up with an awesome household, right? So like there are people, so I'm in AA, which is something that I'm very open about, and I hear a lot in AA about people who have struggled in the past with trauma or any type of abuse, any type of issues in their life. Like I'm very fortunate as I grew up. I came from two loving parents. I had everything that I essentially needed and most of what I wanted, right? So there's nothing that I can like look back to in my past and say, oh, that might have been, the impetus for, a potential addiction occurring in my life. But what I can say is there are alcoholics on both sides of my family. So my mother's side and my father's side. Now, to the best of my knowledge, I am the only person in my family that kind of admits it slash is getting help for it,
Mhm.
which, I'm not wearing that as a badge of honor. I'm just saying I classify a lot of people in my family as like functioning alcoholics.
Mm.
And so I saw as a young kid, like what alcohol did to people. I knew that it was an issue genetically within my family. And just like I share within my classes, I talk about this a lot, whether it be an AA meeting or podcast that I've kind of done before, more on the fitness side. I think genetics loads the gun, but it's the environment that pulls the trigger, right? So like as I grew up, I was anti-alcohol. I didn't really drink in high school. I don't even think I don't believe I was ever drunk in high school.
Mhm.
The first time I ever was intoxicated was basically right after high school, going into college. And I remember it like it was yesterday, right? If you talk to a lot of addicts or alcoholics, not always, but oftentimes, people can put themselves right back into that first usage moment. And I certainly can, right? Like I remember that. And I remember feeling like, wow, this is something, all my stress and anxiety and everything has just kind of like gone away, right? And I chased it. I chased it for, a very long time. What do you graduate high school? 17, 18 years old. I'm 37 now, right? So like I've chased it certainly, for a tremendous amount of time. You know, I grew up it's funny. People talk about addictive behaviors like at a young age. I certainly had that, right? So, like, some of the things I've learned in AA is like lying, cheating, stealing. Like, I had those character defects that a lot oftentimes people talk about. Like, I had those at a young age. My first addiction I talk about all the time was sugar. Like, I remember being a young kid and just like chasing sugar. And, my aunts and uncles would be like, Chris, you crush that whole bowl of candy. And, to be raw and open for a second, like I remember being a young kid and like stealing my classmates' snacks, the sugary snacks that they had. Like it was, it certainly was a problem. And, addiction is really the disease of more. And anything that makes me feel good, I'm going to chase more of it. When I identify as an alcoholic, basically I'm telling people I have an addiction problem. But when I say alcoholic, what that really means is that's my drug of choice,
Mhm.
right? Like, but that doesn't mean that that's the only thing. Like fitness, for example, exercise, I could take too far. Sex, food, sugar, I already brought up. Anything,
Mhm.
anything that makes me feel good, I certainly can take too far. So, by the time I got through high school, I was a high school quarterback. I played at a really good school, Division I high school, and there goes the ego, right? So a lot of addiction, some of these character defects people talk about are like ego, self-centeredness, manipulation. Like I had all those things as a young kid. I'm a master manipulator, like most addicts and alcoholics are.
Mhm.
And, being a high school quarterback, I remember I went to dinner with my dad one day and he's like, listen, Chris, people are probably going to treat you different because you have this title, quote unquote, of a high school quarterback. And they certainly did. And I started filling this void. I didn't realize it at the time, but as a young kid, I always had this void in me and I didn't know how to fill it. So that's where sugar came in. That's where academic and athletic accolades came in. I just wanted people to, like what I was doing. I wanted the praise. I was insecure, for
Mhm.
so long. I needed that outside validation. So I went to college, decided to play football in college, and I went to Bridgewater State. I had opportunities to play in other places, but I went to Bridgewater State, and the first thing I did was started partying. Football wasn't as important. It was the party scene that became more important. And I remember at the time, my college coach came up to me and he's like, "Listen, Chris," he's like, "if this was a popularity contest, you would be our starting quarterback. However, you can't keep yourself out of the party scene, and like that, my college football career went to shit really because of the fact that I was partying too much. And I didn't look at it as a problem,
Mhm.
playing football. A lot of football guys are out and partying. I'm just one of the crowd, because I was with people that were abusing alcohol on a regular basis and a college student, I'm fine. No big deal. It's just a phase. When I get older, I won't be going through the exact same thing. And that
Mhm.
certainly wasn't the case for me. By the end of my college days, and I never started at Bridgewater State as a quarterback. Some of it was due to injury, but most of it was due to the party scene. Being social and partying became more important than football. And I remember, a handful of years ago, my mother came to me and she said, Chris, she said, that's when I knew you were really in trouble because football was your life ever since you were a Pop Warner student, kid, all the way through when you got to college. Football was everything for you. And then you just gave it away, to be a part of the party scene. And, I didn't recognize it at the time, but by the time I graduated my undergrad, I already had a DUI.
Mhm.
And, we talk about in AA different signposts and things along the way that, people should pay attention to, like, hey, this might be a problem. I completely ignored it. So what?
Mhm.
I got a DUI, I drank, and I drove, and it's not that big of a deal. I had known other people that had a DUI and I just ignored it and I went on and did my thing. And, unfortunately with that DUI, I had a good lawyer, and there was an issue with the way that the cop pulled me over, and it got released from my record. So it got pled down to some other conviction. I think it was like reckless driving or something like
Mhm.
that. So then there it goes. Hey, you know
Mhm.
what? I'm good. I got off.
Yeah.
It's not an actual DUI on my record. Moved on. And, when I graduated my undergrad, my goal was to be an NFL strength and conditioning coach. And that was my ultimate dream. And I got my master's at Bridgewater State. And that was a big challenge, because I was still drinking a lot and missing exams and emailing professors, making up excuses. Hey, listen, I can't make it to the midterm exam or the final exam. And it became a very, very serious problem, throughout my master's. But I got a really good position at the University of Connecticut, and I was working in strength and conditioning, Division I football. And I kind of put all that undergrad and graduate stuff aside, and I'm like, all right, I've moved on, I'm good. Let me just start this career, and hopefully I can work in the NFL someday. But the party scene didn't stop. As friends of mine were graduated, they were starting families, they were, buying houses and homes, and there I was just basically acting like I was still in college. And I missed a day with the at the University of Connecticut, and full disclosure, it was because of alcohol. And I lied to the staff and I told them, hey, listen, something came up, it was a family emergency, whatever the case may be, and just ignored it and didn't even think about it and just moved right on and continued to do my thing. And to make a long story short, like I had plenty of opportunities. I worked at the University of Iowa, I worked at the University of Maryland. I was able to get potential opportunities in the NFL, but I couldn't keep myself healthy, and essentially it became my demise.
Mhm.
And because of that, my family had to step in. And basically, my parents, they had a family friend, which I knew as a kid that and still to this day, is an addiction therapist. And so they're like, we think you should go see him. And I'm like, for what? Like at the time,
Yeah.
I'm right around the age of probably 23, 24 at this time. And I'm like, for what? Why do I have to go see him? And they're like, we think that you have a problem. And if you don't take care of this, it's just going to continually progress and it's going to get worse. And, we'd like you to go sit down with him at least for one conversation. So I did. I met with him and it was comfortable for me because I knew the guy. It wasn't a stranger. So I sat down in his office and we talked about a lot of things and I kind of shared with him my story and he shared with me, okay, that's about the same thing that I've heard from your parents, which is great. You're not lying or you're not trying to run from this. Like you are admitting, some of the issues that alcohol has caused in your life. So, I was probably, with this therapist for 5, 6 years, something like that. But he was the one that convinced me to go to my first AA meeting. And that's
Mhm.
basically where I'll kind of stop and let you jump in. At 24 years
Mhm.
old, I realized, okay, there is some sort of an issue. Whether or not I wanted to call myself an alcoholic is
Mhm.
two separate issues, but I knew that there was a problem, right? So I considered an alcoholic was the person that was like drinking a brown bag underneath a bridge, homeless with
Yeah.
nothing, right? And what I've learned over the years, and we'll probably get into this, is alcoholics come in a lot of different shapes and sizes, and there's a lot of different paths and kind of scenarios and contextual things that can make an alcoholic. But 24 years old, I went to my first AA meeting and kind of have progressed little by little from there. But that's kind
Mhm.
of the background. I'll let you
Yeah.
jump in and then we'll go from there.
Yeah. Um, I mean, there's a lot of similarities in both of our stories, and I mean, it's always difficult when you look at like the past and looking in like when you were in that present moment in the past, you don't necessarily always see it. You know, coming up with the different excuses and oh no, it's not a problem. Someone once told me I was at a meeting at one point. It wasn't an AA meeting. I had to take like a drunk driving course. And um, they pretty much had treated me like I was an alcoholic, which was very demeaning to me. And I was young. I was still in college, um, and I really, really hated it. I really hated anyone that walked in, um, and they treated you like an alcoholic. And the thing that stuck out to me, though, that I've always kept is it's only you're only an alcoholic when it impedes on your personal life. And for some reason, I've never really like been able to depict it and in terms of like, okay, is that really true? Is that what it means to be an alcoholic? Is only if it impedes on your personal life? So I'm just curious of your thoughts when I make that statement.
Yeah, it's a really good question or, kind of point to bring up. I think, yeah, like personal life, if alcohol is impacting your personal life, it's a potential problem. Your
Mhm.
financial life, it's a
Mm.
potential problem. Your career, potential problem. Personal relationships, I mean, your own um, kind of self-satisfaction with where you are in life. All of these things are something to kind of look into. I look at an alcoholic, in general as somebody that doesn't know or necessarily have control over when and how much that they drink.
Mm.
And that could be somebody drinks 3 drinks and they
Mhm.
think that, they're ultimately an alcoholic because they had no intention of drinking 3 drinks. For me, it was much more than that, right?
Mhm.
So there's a lot of different factors, as far as like what somebody is ultimately considered, an alcoholic. But for me, I went to my first AA meeting. Like I said, I was 24, and I don't remember much about it, but
Mhm.
I do remember this guy stood up and he was talking about how he had like 8, 9 years of sobriety and he borrowed his friend's sports car. So his friend had like a nice sports car, and he's out. It's a nice summer day. He's driving around, and he essentially just the thought came into his head, you know what? It's a nice sunny day. I'm in a sports car. I'm going to stop off at a sports bar and get a beer. And obviously, at somebody in an AA meeting, we all know how that story ended. He drank
Mhm.
much more than he wanted to, lost control.
Mhm.
And although I couldn't identify at the time as like a 24-year-old kid
Mhm.
driving around in a nice fancy sports car, what I could identify with was somebody drinking when they didn't anticipate to, or maybe even didn't want to, and then had little or no control over the amount that they drank.
Mhm.
And that certainly identified me. And I could kind of start to identify as, maybe I am an alcoholic because I do kind of understand that thought process,
Mhm.
where, not a common phrase in AA is not every time I drank, I got in trouble, but every time I got in trouble, I was drinking. And
Mhm.
that identifies me 1,000%, right?
Mhm.
Like, I have had plenty of times where I drank, I controlled it, maybe had a few drinks, went home, no problem. But as an alcoholic, which I view myself as, which I can say now,
Mhm.
honestly from my soul and heart, at the time, I looked at it as, look, I'm fine. I went out to the bar or I'm home. I only had a few drinks. I stopped and I went to bed so I can
Mhm.
control it. Right. And so that's the hard part is like, it's really difficult to identify an alcoholic. It is the only disease known to man that is self-diagnosed. You
Mhm.
are the only person that can raise your hand and say you're an alcoholic. I can't point to another person, even though I've been in AA. I can't
Mhm.
point to another person and say, hey, you're an alcoholic. I can't do that. It's the only
Mhm.
disease that is self-diagnosed. And what's very interesting about this disease is it's the only disease that also tells you you don't have a disease,
Mhm.
right? So that leaves me as an alcoholic in a really tough situation, right? So,
Mhm.
like, I have a disease that tells me I don't have it, and I'm the only one that can raise my hand and say that I am an alcoholic.
Mhm.
And I think that's why a lot of people, including myself, I'm the first to raise my hand, take this thing to like what sometimes we talk about in AA as the bitter end,
Mhm.
like truly hitting rock bottom. And rock bottom is different for everybody, right?
Mhm.
Like just because you haven't lost your job or you haven't lost your family or your self-respect or anything like that doesn't mean that you're not an alcoholic. Some people just kind of, we talk about getting off the elevator at
Mhm.
different floors. Some people get off the elevator of addiction at a higher floor, and some people take it all the way down to nothing, which is what I viewed an alcoholic as somebody that was homeless, drinking out of a brown paper bag, living underneath a bridge, not taking care of themselves. And certainly that's one piece of the pie, but it
Mhm.
is definitely not the definition of an alcoholic.
Yeah. So when I hear that, I think that the best way to go with this is, where was your rock bottom here?
Well, in order to get to that, I think I should share a little bit more of like my journey, and then
Mhm.
I'll kind of get to like where ultimately the rock bottom is.
Mhm.
So yeah, like at 24 years old, walked into my first AA meeting, and like I said, we talk about in AA a lot. You want to identify with people, don't compare, right? And so if that's one quote unquote suggestion I can give people that believe that they're struggling is, I certainly believe in AA, or there's other forms of recovery, NA, there's smart recovery, there's Dharma recovery. You can go see a therapist. I mean, I don't care how you plan on getting sober, just find what's right for you.
Mhm.
Like there's a lot of different avenues. Um, but I went and I was there and I was comparing, not identifying. I was like, oh, I'm not as bad as that person, or like, I'm working on my PhD. This person, has nothing, whatever the case may be. And like, what a terrible way of kind of looking at it, because I didn't know what was in store for me as this progressed over the years.
Mhm.
Right. So I think that's number one for me is I had to learn how to identify with people from all walks of life, no matter where they came from. And this is my opinion, but all addicts and alcoholics share one common thread, and that's pain, right? There's pain that's associated with, the life that we've lived up to that point, and something somewhere brought me into that room, right? So
Mhm.
that was big. Like I said, I was comparing, not identifying. And in my early days of going to AA, I would hear things like, this is a fatal and progressive disease. And I didn't want to listen to that. Like,
Mhm.
what do you mean, disease? I didn't even want to recognize it as a disease. And I certainly wasn't willing to recognize the fact that it was going to be progressive.
Mhm.
I just thought, you know what? I'm young. I got plenty of friends that are doing the same thing. I'm perfectly fine,
Mhm.
and it certainly wasn't the case. But, because I was in an AA room, for those of you guys who have never been to an AA meeting, the meeting starts most likely with everybody raising their hand and saying, "Hi, I'm Chris. I'm an alcoholic." And I did not want to do that. I remember my first meeting. I was like sweating. I'm like, man, I have to raise my hand in front of a group full of strangers and say to them that I'm an alcoholic. And I did. But I wish I could say that at 24 years old, I got the message right away, and I got sober. And that certainly wasn't the case for me. Relapse has been a part of my story, and it's been a huge part of my story, which I like to share about because for a lot of people it is, right? Like, there are very fortunate people that decide that they have a problem and never use a drink or a drug again. And I commend those people. That just hasn't been the story for me.
Mhm.
So I went on, and, I kind of dabbled in and out of AA throughout the years. And I've been in and out for, I'm 37 now, and I walked in at 24. So 13, I'm almost 38. So 13, 14 years. And I would hear things like jails, institutions, and death. It's a big common phrase that people talk about. And I'm a young kid in my mid 20s saying, I'm never going to jail.
Yeah.
There's no way I'm going to ever go to rehab. Like, what are you
Mhm.
talking about, institutions? And I'm not going to die from this. I'm simply just doing what is normal in society. And boy, was I so wrong, like, just so wrong in that. So I dabbled in and out of AA, and, I got my PhD, and I started working as a professor, and, things weren't getting any better. It's like, a lot of, at least in my case, I always thought, okay, if I can get to this next stage of life, I'll be fine. Or if I
Mhm.
can get this next accomplishment, I'll be fine. And it just wasn't the case for me. Over and over and over again, there was alcohol. It just never, I could never eliminate it from my life. And I think the final straw for me, it was about a year ago, little over a year ago. I had like 5 or 6 big drinking issues, or episodes, I call them, within a very short time period. My parents were stepping in, family was reaching out, friends were reaching. It just got really, really bad. And
Mhm.
that was like the day that I realized, like, man, if I don't do something about this, I will die.
Mhm.
And it wasn't until, and I don't, I was intoxicated when that thought came across my head. So it wasn't a sober thought.
Mhm.
It was under the influence of alcohol. And I said to myself, I'm going to die. This is it. And it's going to happen fast if I don't honestly look at myself in the mirror and do something about this. I had lost careers. I've lost so many relationships. I've
Mhm.
lost so many friends. I've lost, just so money, the financial aspect of it. There's just so much loss along the way. And, unfortunately for me, I got so good at building my life back up. It would crash down. I would create problems with my addiction, and I would build it back up, and it would crash down and build it back up. And I got comfortable in that cycle.
Mhm.
But, a little over a year ago, I went to treatment for the second time. It wasn't
Mhm.
even the first time I went into treatment. The first time I went into treatment was 2019. And man, I had tears in my eyes. I was scared shitless to walk into that facility. But I thought that when I walked in there, I don't know what I thought. I thought I was walking into some like Malibu,
Yeah.
you know, rehab center, and there's going to be massage therapists, and it's like world class, psychotherapy, and I'm going to be able to use the gym. And it just wasn't like that at all. That just wasn't my experience. And it really came down to me being honest with myself, open-minded with myself, and willing to do the work that people that had success, that were teaching me the way, willing to actually do that work. And I didn't, and that's what brought me into treatment, again. And that was a little over a year ago. And that's when, like I said, I knew if there wasn't something I was going to do about this, that was it. I was going to die. And I didn't want to become that like Facebook obituary of like, hey, really good guy, had
Mm,
some success, charismatic, but just couldn't get it,
mm,
and I just didn't want to become that person. I knew that I've always had the knack for like educating and
mm,
teaching and talking. And, I'm like, man, I can do something with this. This doesn't have to be my defining characteristic as an alcoholic, and I don't have to die from this. And so that was my aha, rock bottom moment, whatever you
mhm,
want to call it. And I wish I could say from that time point, I've never picked up a drink again.
mhm,
And we'll get to that in a second. I'll let you chime in a little bit, but I
mhm,
wish that was it for me, but
mhm,
it wasn't. I've learned more along the way. But it's really, really been a tough road. I've learned so much, even just within this past year, but yeah, 5, 6 relapses within a very short time period. I knew I was going to die and I had to do something. And I had my parents drop me off to treatment again,
mm.
for the second time.
Yeah. Um, I mean, the biggest takeaways that I always notice is when we're struggling, the people that are around us see it, but we don't always see it. Just like similar to your story when family is reaching out and friends are reaching out, and for some reason in our mind we create these excuses or we create this false reality and everyone else sees it, but for some reason we can't see it. And I don't completely understand why we're not able to see it. And then even throughout like your journey, like this helped create the man that you are today, right? If you hadn't been through all of that, we might not even be talking about this now. Someone that's listening may not be getting the wisdom or that aha moment that they need right now. Um, so I don't know your thoughts on like coincidences and things like this and what your soul needs in order to learn the lessons that it needs. All of that, like that realm in a sense. So do you think that this is just like, because I know that you said like this is what like my soul needed to do like at one point. Do you really feel like this journey for you was like meant very specifically for you?
Yes, I do. And I'm really glad you brought this up because when I was teaching at college a few years ago, I had this like plaque in my apartment and it was given to me by a girlfriend.
Mhm,
And it said, God does not call the qualified, he qualifies the called. And basically I started taking that as like, hey, there's a reason why I've been through what I've been through, and I can help other people. And really that's like been the crux of it.
mhm,
um I I'm not a very or I how do I say this? Let me start from the beginning.
mhm.
I grew up Catholic. My
Mhm.
parents put me in Catholic school. I had some religion in my life. Okay. And for the listeners out there, please don't get turned off by the religion or God thing. Bear with me for a second, right? I had some religion in my life, but I got away from it, right? And as I went through the process of AA is very spiritual, okay? And I don't want people to mistake the difference between religion and spirituality.
Mhm,
There's a difference between those two. And in AA, I used to hear things like religion is for people who are afraid to go to hell, but spirituality is for people that have already been there. And I certainly was living in my own hell for a long, long time because alcohol was running the show. It made all the decisions for me.
mhm,
And as I honestly reflected back on my alcoholism, somebody, somewhere, some spirit, something, some higher power, call it God, something kept me alive through all these scenarios. I don't believe there's any coincidences in life.
Mhm.
I do on it is I can say that now. I wasn't saying that 5 years ago. I wasn't saying it 10 years ago,
Mhm.
but I honestly believe there's no coincidences in life. I think there is a plan. And that, for me, kind of helped me along the way because I was like, all right, listen, you know, I went through a lot. Somebody kept me alive, and I have a gift, and I want to share that with other people, right? And then I would hear people talk about in AA how, just like I talked about earlier in this podcast, some sort of void, and I'm filling it with anything that I can, whether it be work, whether it be alcohol, whether it be sugar, sex, TV. I don't care what it is, anything that gets me outside of myself, I was kind of looking towards. And as time has gone on, like I said, I've definitely recognized that like I am here for a reason. This has happened for a reason. And I certainly have the opportunity to help other people
Mhm.
and kind of share my experience because I'm not afraid to do that, right? Like
Mhm.
I'm not knocking people that don't want to come out and share their story. Like it's very personal and I don't
Mhm.
blame anybody for that. But like I'm the type of person where like, hey, I went through a lot of hell, I have a lot of pain, and I'm very willing, to come out and kind of raise some awareness for this. But yeah, certainly, like there's a reason for all this, and I'm very, very happy to be here and be able to kind of share my understanding of this and kind of what I've done along the way to help other people.
Mm. Now, all of that pain and like that void that you were trying to fill, what do you think that pain, what was the void that you were really trying to fill with alcohol?
See, that's like what I was talking about earlier in this podcast is like I think there are certain people that struggle with addiction that can go back because I've heard it in meetings that can
Mhm.
go back and point to like this was a traumatic event in my life and things have
Mhm.
never been the same. Like I really don't have that,
Mhm.
and maybe somewhere down the line as I get more sobriety, maybe somewhere down the line I'll be able to have the kind of introspective way of looking at it and say, hey, maybe that was it. But I don't have that,
Mhm.
like I really don't know why or what. I'm gonna go back to the whole thing of genetics loads the
Mhm.
gun, but environment pulls the trigger. Like if you
Mhm.
shake my family tree,
Mhm.
alcoholics are going to fall out left and
Mhm.
right, right? So I just think it's as simple as that. I think I have a genetic predisposition
Mhm.
for the abuse of alcohol. And when I let it get to a certain point, which I did, after high school and early college, I let it get to a certain point where now my brain chemistry has got to a point where it essentially requires alcohol.
Mhm.
And so I put myself in that situation. So I'm one of those people where when I do share in AA or at a commitment in AA where we go out and go to other groups, like I don't have the same story as other people, but I have the same pain,
Mhm.
right? And so, people ask me all the time, why or when or what, I really can't point to anything like that. What I can point to is right around 24 when I did get out of strength and conditioning and I lost potential NFL opportunities and my kind of NFL career dream was shot. I certainly saw an inflection point in my alcohol use. Living a life that I didn't see myself living. I was happy to go and work on my PhD, and I've
Mhm.
really enjoyed being a professor, but this wasn't the dream when I was an undergraduate or graduate student. I never saw myself here. Happy that I am, and I love it. Trust me. Education has a special place in my heart, but it certainly wasn't, my first choice.
See, so now you've been a professor for so long, and alcohol is so um just mainstream, especially in it's just I'm not sure. Mainstream isn't the word, but just normalized, especially in college, the party scene, all of these types of things. So, even with your students, how are you bringing this up to them, if at all? And how are you helping them with possibly their own struggles that you see or don't see?
I love this question because, like, as I've had Instagram for a while, way back when you were one of my students, and I think
Mhm.
I started it in somewhere around the 2016, 17-ish range,
Mhm.
somewhere in there. And it started as more so like, just sharing internship opportunities, job opportunities, what was going around on campus. And then I started dabbling and getting more and more into like, here's some personal life. Here's my nieces and nephews,
Mm-hmm.
here's my family, whatnot. Here's something I'm doing on the weekends. And, as I started to realize like, hey, this is a super serious problem, I was like, man, I could use Instagram and share the fact that I am in recovery. I think people, when you're a professor, sometimes students think that professors are like robots and
Mm-hmm.
we live like this great life and we're dictators in the classroom
Mm-hmm.
and this and that and we don't struggle with things. And of course we do. You know what I mean? We're human beings too. And so I looked at that as an opportunity to start to raise awareness. And so I started posting about like, hey, listen, I'm struggling too. I'm in AA and all that type of stuff. And, in my classes, since I've come out and done that within the last year or so, I do share about it in classes and students do ask me questions about it. And then some students that want a little bit more detail or maybe are struggling themselves, they'll come to my office.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been a great thing, to like
Mm-hmm.
have that connection with students that are like, hey, you know what? I'm struggling as well. Or my family member that I'm really close with has struggled. And so I know what you're going through and keep up the hard work. So that's been great. And then I will say this, and one of the reasons why I really wanted to be on this podcast is there is a high prevalence of addiction in the fitness industry,
Mm-hmm.
and especially with like people like myself that go into like strength and conditioning and that are working at a high level. I was working in the Division 1 level. I had opportunities to work in the NFL, and substance abuse is a very common thing
Mm-hmm.
at that level that I don't think enough people talk about. And a lot of people lose their careers over it or have to kind of branch out and do something else or whatever the case may be. And so that's where I was like, man, I can start to play a role here and help people that are young professionals that are kind of coming through the ranks. And just a
Mm-hmm.
few weeks ago, I had a student come up to me and they're like, man, Dr. Swart, I really appreciate the fact that, you share about the party lifestyle and what you went through as maybe an undergrad or a graduate student. And, some of my friends asked me to go out and I say no. I'm more concerned with my health and I'm an athlete. And you're just reassuring me that, like, I'm on the right path to continue to take care of myself. And I don't have to be a part of that, party lifestyle and out and about and doing all these things and maybe get myself in trouble. And that was
Mm-hmm.
like a really good moment for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying, I don't want anybody to twist my words. I'm not saying just because you go out and party and drink alcohol that you're obviously, you're all of a sudden going to become an
Yeah.
alcoholic.
Yeah.
But, we do see it. And I think addiction and alcoholism is just so much more prevalent than people really think.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why, like, I'm one of those people, and I'm at a point in my career when where I can come out and say this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not real early in my career where I'm afraid to like make a bad name for myself. Like I'm at a
Mm-hmm.
point where I'm not afraid to come out and say, yes, I'll raise my hand first.
Mm-hmm.
I've struggled a lot. And, I'm here to help. If there's
Mm-hmm.
any student of mine, whether it be current or former student, anybody that listens to your podcast, anybody that finds me in any way, shape, or form, I am 100% willing to have a conversation, share my experience, and share what I'm doing today because that's all I have. I can't
Mm-hmm.
tell you what to do. I can't tell anybody what to do. All
Mm-hmm.
I can do is share, what I've gone through and hope somebody can take some information up from it, just like I hope people that listen to this podcast, can get some awareness or information or some sort of maybe it's just hope or faith, from this
Mm-hmm.
conversation. But that's really what I'm looking for. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what I'm looking for, when I do talk about it within the classroom.
Yeah. So, with someone listening to this, perhaps they know someone that is starting to, they're like, you know what? I feel like, you know, Jim Bob is, really struggling with alcohol or addiction of some sort. What are some of the signs that we can start to look for within others? Not necessarily within ourselves, but someone that's like close to us. What are some of the signs where, hey, you know what? I think I think that this person is struggling. How can we start to be more aware of the people that are struggling around us and making that first step, whether it's overstepping or not, into their life and helping them uh, either realize that they have some issues, have a problem, or you know what, hey, how can we help them best?
I think it's a really tricky situation,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I'll share with you my thoughts, whether they're right or wrong, but it's
Mm-hmm.
so tricky because I know so many people along the way tried to tell me that I had an issue or talk to me about it, and I wanted no part of it,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the first thing I'll say is you're not ready till you're ready, right? And so if you know somebody in your life that is struggling with any type of substance abuse, to go and accuse them or put them down, in my opinion, because I'm just sharing my opinion,
Mm-hmm.
is the absolute wrong way to go about it.
Mm-hmm.
Some of the signs are a lot of them are pretty easy to spot, and some of
Mm-hmm.
them are hard to spot, right? Like we talked about earlier in this podcast, people who are professionally starting to suffer, they're missing work, they're not getting their job responsibilities done on time. Like clearly that's a big part of it. The financial side of it, alcoholism or substance abuse starts to hit the financial side of it. It starts to hit on personal relationships. All of those types of things are certainly there. Um, I think some of the things that we're looking for, one of the bigger ones is isolation. We
Mm-hmm.
do see a lot of addicts and alcoholics start to isolate and kind of drink or use behind the scenes or at home, or, this one-time sociable person is now not around anymore. So we
Mm-hmm.
can start to see that. We can start to see personality changes a lot in people, um, kind of irritability, restlessness, and discontentedness. So we talk about that on the alcoholic side. We call it RID, RID,
Mm-hmm.
restlessness, irritability, discontentedness. And essentially, those three things are classified as untreated alcoholism.
Mm-hmm.
And you can use the same in basically any substance, right? So when someone's getting very, restless, irritable, discontent more than they typically are, that's usually a sign, that something's, probably going on. Then we get into things like anxiety,
Mm-hmm.
depression. You start to see people pulling away a little bit. You start to see their dietary habits change. You start to see things that they were once interested in, they're not doing anymore. So,
Mm-hmm.
like for me, it would be fitness because obviously I'm a professor of exercise science. Fitness is a big part of my life. People in my life start to get their radar raised when I'm not working out as much or eating very poorly. And I start to rely on more processed and high sugar foods because I'm trying to drive that dopamine,
Mm-hmm.
without using a substance. So these are all signs that I think are worth looking into and kind of noticing.
Mm-hmm.
When it comes to getting to the point of like approaching somebody,
Mm-hmm.
the last thing you want to do is accuse somebody, right? So, like, in my opinion, the best way to go about it is simply just to bring up what you've seen, not in an accusatory way. Just say, hey, I've noticed these things. If you need somebody to talk to, or you need some help, or you want to just like go see a movie, and just do something different, just let me know. I'm here
Mm-hmm.
for you. Reach out to me if you need me. To
Mm-hmm.
be honest with you, if I had somebody in my life that I knew was struggling, that's the extent of where I'm going to go.
Mm-hmm.
If I know them maybe a little bit more and I know a little bit more of their history, I might say like, hey, I'm also, because speaking me personally,
Mm-hmm.
I'm an alcoholic myself. I go to these AA meetings.
Mm-hmm.
If you want to come with me someday, invitations open. Not saying like, here's the date and time, come with me
Mm-hmm.
this time, you better show up. Just
Mm-hmm.
simply saying, hey, these are the things that I do. If you ever want to dabble in it, if you ever want to get the opportunity, to kind of see what it's all about, I'm happy to escort you to your first meeting so you're not doing it alone,
Mm-hmm.
and kind of go from there.
Yeah.
With that said, you don't have to be in AA to go, excuse me, you don't have to be an alcoholic to go to certain AA meetings. So, speaking with alcoholism specifically, but
Mm-hmm.
if you know somebody in your life that's struggling, there are open meetings of Alcoholics Anonymous. Even if you've never been to one, but you know somebody in your life is struggling,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to tell you to tell them they have to go, but
Mm-hmm.
you could simply say, hey, here's a local AA meeting. If you're ever interested in going, I'll go with you,
Mm-hmm.
because an open meeting anybody can attend. closed AA meetings, you have to be an alcoholic or have a desire to stop drinking in order to go to them. But I don't think that's a bad thing either, is to simply say, hey, I'll come with you as support. I can't tell you how many meetings I go to where somebody raises their hand and say, hey, I'm just here to support Shawn,
Hmm.
for example. And I love that. I think that's beautiful. But those are some of the signs. There's obviously a lot more, but those are some of the signs and things to kind of look out for, in this process.
Hmm. Now, I also want to see why you think now is the right time for you to start to open up and talk about this as opposed to 6 months ago, or the first time that you were coming out of rehab in 2019. Why have you decided that now this is the time?
I really, really great that you asked that, because look, when I went to AA for the first time, I heard things like you should have a sponsor. And for those of you listeners who don't know, a sponsor is basically a sober coach, somebody that has more sobriety, that not always more sobriety than you, but somebody that, kind of has good experience in the program. And they can kind of lead you through the way of AA in my example, but it could be NA, it could be Smart Recovery, there's Dharma Recovery, it could be anything. And so, I got a sponsor. I really enjoy the guy that I'm working with. I think he's an excellent person. I've started attending AA meetings much more regularly now than I ever have. And that's what people told me, like in my early days, get a sponsor, go to meetings. People used to tell me meeting makers make it, just as a little side
Mhm.
tangent. And that was like a big phrase in AA. And what they're getting at is the more meetings you go to, the more opportunity and the more kind of chances you have to hear other people. But what I took it as, me personally, this alcoholic, is, oh, that's all I have to do is just go to meetings
Mhm.
and I'm going to be okay.
Mhm.
And, there are certainly people out there that stay sober just going to meetings, but that wasn't my case, right?
Mhm.
And so, I got the sponsor. I started going to many more meetings than I ever have. There's something known as the 12 steps for people who are unfamiliar in recovery. And basically, the 12 steps are a process of self-reflection and a kind of a blueprint for a better way of living. Living a more, I hate to use the word spiritual to scare
Mhm.
people away, but that's kind of what it is, right? AA
Mhm.
is a very spiritual program.
Mhm.
And I started learning, kind of, my past and my patterns. And I started going on a lot of speaking commitments and sharing. I go to not only the treatment center that I got my treatment at, I go back every week for an alumni meeting, but
Mhm.
I've started speaking at hospitals and institutions, speaking at other AA groups. I have what's called a home group. Actually, I have multiple home groups,
Mhm.
which a home group is essentially an AA meeting that you attend on a regular basis. So you kind of have like your own little network within a bigger network
Mhm.
of recovery. So people notice like, hey, when you're off a little bit, or when you're not showing up to a meeting. So, and then like I have a today I have a higher power,
Mhm.
which I choose to call God.
Mhm.
And I don't want to scare anybody away. I know I keep saying that, but like I know it's a
Mhm.
big thing because it kind of scared me away.
Mhm.
I have a spiritual relationship with something bigger than me,
Mhm.
right? So the reason why I believe that now's the time for me is because I finally have these things in place that people told me along the way were really important that I ignored. I kind of thought like, part of addiction is kind of like, I'm the great I am, and I can do this myself, and I don't need you. And, yes, AA works, and let me kind of do it my way. And that was kind of how I viewed it for over a decade,
Mhm.
until finally I realized my way is not working. It's just
Mhm.
not working. Everything that I thought I was doing right, I wasn't. I was dabbling. It was kind of like sticking my toe in the water of recovery. And
Mhm.
now that I have these things in place and I have momentum and I'm starting to like really become one of, AA instead of just on the outskirts, I'm not just on the outside of the herd where I
Mhm.
can get chipped off and next thing you know, I'm off and running. I'm in the middle. People notice when like I said, people notice when I'm not there. They notice, when something's off. So now that I have that foundation, and I have a better understanding and I'm not done with the steps yet, but I'm towards the
Mhm.
end of it. And so now that I have a better understanding of myself and who I am and my past, and willing to own up to my mistakes and not be afraid to share them, because a problem shared is a problem halved. And I think that speaking is just so important. At least it is for this alcoholic. The
Mhm.
more I share, the more I open up, the better I feel.
Mhm.
So certainly part of this is to help other people, but a big part of this is to help myself. And I want that to be very clear for people who may be struggling or may struggle at some time in their life. Sharing this information and being of service to
Mhm.
other people by sharing your story is a tremendous kind of medicine, to kind of help the process, of recovery. There's a saying in AA, this is the last thing I'll say before I let
Mhm.
you jump in, but there's a
Mhm.
saying in AA, and I love it. It's one of my favorites. We walk in the halls of AA, egomaniacs, and we work our way up to servant. And that's certainly been my story. I walked into AA. I know everything. I'm going to do this myself. I've got a good job. I'm a doctor. I've got a PhD. I've had success in my career. I'm not like you guys. That's how I walked into the whole process of it. And
Mhm.
now, boy, it couldn't be any more, it couldn't be any more different from that. Now it's like, hey, where can I help the next person? How
Mhm.
can I be of service to other people that are struggling, and let me share my story. And the service piece of it has been able to allow me to get out of myself, just like alcohol allowed me to get out of myself, and create this false reality by putting myself at the bottom of a bottle. Now I'm able to kind of, share and be part of something, and kind of allow myself to do the next right thing. I look at spirituality, which I feel like I have today, as
Mhm.
simply doing the next right thing. Whatever is in front of me, everything that's in front of me is simply an opportunity to grow. There's
Mhm.
challenges, there's good times, there's bad times, but anything that I'm dealing with right in the moment, how can I grow from this? It's an opportunity to grow, and how can I use this to help other people? For example, tonight, after this podcast and after I'm done teaching, I'm going home. I'm going to meet with my sponsor. We do a weekly meeting. We're going to sit down and talk about some different things and do some step work. And then tonight, I'm going to AdCare in Worcester, Mass,
Mhm.
which is a treatment facility. And I'm going to share my story. I'm doing a commitment. And that's service to other people that I've been in their seat very recently. I know exactly what they're going through. So I'm taking time out of my night tonight to go sit down, with this hospital and with these patients that are in treatment, and just hopefully they can take something from my message to give them hope. Hope to me, hope is everything. Hope stands for hang on, pain ends. Like I said, pain seems to be the common denominator with everybody, most people that struggle with addiction. And I'm just there to provide some hope. Hey, there is a way out. Not that I have, a ton of sobriety, or I am like the master of sobriety and I can write a course on it. Certainly not. I'm learning so much every day. But if I can provide hope for the next person, I can put my head on my pillow at night knowing that I got another day sober. Today was a success, regardless of what happens in my day. I didn't pick up a drink or a drug. I put my head on my pillow, and I'm a miracle. Like I really
Mhm.
feel that today. I'm a miracle every single day when I can go through a day without using a drink or a drug.
Yeah, it's beautifully said. And I mean, even with all the talk of spirituality, I think this is a very open platform that I've created where we have so many guests that are so differently versed in their views and beliefs of spirituality, and everyone is always open to these different because it looks a little bit different for every single person. um my biggest question from everything you've said is you referred to yourself as an alcoholic, right? And does there come a time where you no longer refer to yourself, hey, I'm an alcoholic, and it turns into, hey, I used to be an alcoholic?
I like that. So once again, I say I'm an alcoholic, but at the end of the day, the bigger umbrella is addiction. Addiction is the
Mhm.
big umbrella, right? Addiction is the disease of more. Anything that I use that gets me out of myself, is an addiction.
Mhm.
Something like, boy, I'm gonna try to come up with an example off the top of my exercise, for example,
Mhm.
right? Exercise on the surface is a very healthy thing to do. But if you take it too far, it's an addiction, right?
Mhm.
So you could be addicted to anything. So addiction is the big umbrella. And essentially what I'm saying is when I say that I'm an alcoholic, that's my drug of choice. And I like
Mhm.
to identify that way so people know. Clearly, during a podcast like this, I'm going to share a lot more of my story. But if I just quickly, whether I'm in an AA or an NA meeting, people know. And, the question is like, is there a time period where like I refer to myself as a former alcoholic in some way, shape, or form? And I'm never going to do that.
Mhm.
I can't say never, right? Like just like we
Mhm.
talk about it, don't ever say always or never.
Mhm.
But I don't believe I'm ever going to do that. And here's why. Some people will raise their hand in AA meetings and say, "Hi, I'm Chris. I'm a recovered," using the ED, recovered alcoholic. And I understand why people may say that, and I'm not here to judge anybody else. But the one thing that I've learned about this disease is it is never going away. This is something that I will have for the rest of my life. And I do believe I was born an alcoholic or I was born
Mhm.
an addict. It was just a matter of when and where was it going to manifest itself and was it going to be life threatening,
Mhm.
you know? And so for me, alcohol is life threatening, but there's a lot of other addictions people can have that aren't necessarily life threatening, but still causes problems in their life. Mine is fatal, right?
Mhm.
And so one of the things I talk about a lot in AA is I've realized throughout this process I will always be an alcoholic. I will die an alcoholic. Why do I say that? Because I've heard people with 30, 40, 50 years of sobriety go out, drink alcohol, and be right back where they left off several decades later,
Mhm.
right? And I've heard it time and time and time again. I've never heard a person go out after being a part of AA for an extended time period, go out and then come back to an AA meeting and say, "Hey, you guys were all wrong. I started drinking again and it's been perfectly fine and there's never been any issues and I'm cured. I'm healthy. I'm fine."
Mhm.
It's just never happened. I've never seen it, right? So I use the phrase, I am an alcoholic for life. I will always be an alcoholic and I will die an alcoholic, but I don't have to die an active alcoholic. And I think that's where the discrepancy is. I'm an alcoholic, but currently today I'm not an active alcoholic. I'm not out there actively using. I am in recovery.
Mhm.
And when I first started going to AA, I didn't know the difference between sobriety and recovery, right?
Mhm.
Sobriety to me is just a general term of I'm not drinking,
Mhm.
right? I don't drink alcohol, I'm not drinking. But there is a term known as dry drunk that gets brought up a lot. And what that term means is somebody that, yes, they may not be drinking anymore, or they may not be using anymore, but they are still restless, irritable, and discontent. And all the other, kind of character defects that go with that. And
Mhm.
so, though that's not the type of person I want to be around. I don't want to, and me personally, I don't want to be. I don't want to be somebody that, yes, I don't drink alcohol, but I'm a miserable prick. Like, I don't, you know what I mean? Like,
Mhm.
I don't want to be
Mhm.
that guy that nobody wants to be around.
Yeah.
I want recovery, right? And so, recovery to me, at least in my journey, is I need the spiritual piece of it. I
Mhm.
need the sponsor. I need the 12 steps. I need to go on commitments and speak about this stuff. I need to have home groups because I have multiple home groups. I need all those things, and that's recovery.
Mhm.
So I'm never going to say that I'm recovered. I don't believe I'll ever say that because I don't meet from where I stand in my perspective on addiction. I don't believe that you ever become recovered. I
Mhm.
think you can recover from the mental obsession,
Mhm.
which is certainly where I was for a long time. I was constantly thinking about alcohol. When is the next time I'm going to be able to drink alcohol? When is the next time I have this like window? How much can I drink? Like all that type of stuff, right? I do believe you can recover from the obsession, but you're never going, in my opinion, I don't think people ever recover from the disease. We talk about in AA becoming essentially becoming a pickle, right? A
Right.
cucumber, once you cross the line to become a pickle, you can't ever go back to being a cucumber.
Hmm.
I crossed somewhere in my addiction, I crossed this theoretical line of addiction where now it's a problem.
Mm-hmm.
And now I can't go back. I can't ever safely, I know this now today, I can't ever safely go out and drink alcohol.
Mm-hmm.
I might be able to do it once. I might be able to do it 20 times, right? But that'd be the worst thing that ever happens to me because then I get this confidence that I'm okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
Eventually it will get me. I can't drink in safety. I can't use alcohol. I am an alcoholic. I will die an alcoholic. But today, knowing what I know now about the disease and knowing what I know now about my experience, I don't have to die an active alcoholic. And I think that's where the discrepancy comes from. Never recovered, but I am a non-active alcoholic currently.
I think that's very helpful just in terms of like showcasing different words and how we define them and um even just like that line of being crossed, how you can't necessarily go back. I think that's going to be very helpful for a lot of people that are listening. um I'm just going to keep bombarding you with questions here. So
Please do.
um where I want to go next, when we were in class, so this is 2016, 2017, 2018, around this 3-year block, the best of your memory when you were a professor at Bridgewater. So could there have been signs from myself as a student that I could have seen in you at that time to know that this was even something that you were struggling with?
I don't believe so. I think, even if a student spent a relatively significant amount of time period in my office, and in my class, you're only seeing me for a brief snapshot, of time throughout the course of the week.
Mm-hmm.
And, I was and always have been very good at when I walk into the classroom, I can put everything in my life aside. I've just always been able to do that. No matter what's going on, I walk in and I do my job, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, and I put on a show. Alcoholics, by nature, myself included, are very good at disguising and making things seem like on the surface everything is great. So, I don't believe very many people noticed or recognized my alcohol use or
Mm-hmm.
that I was struggling or dealing with things. Now, somebody who spent more time with me clearly would start to notice some behaviors or, kind of schedule changes and, kind of things that I was doing. I've even had people tell me that, like, when I text them,
Mm-hmm.
they can tell or they have been able to tell whether I'm drinking or not just by
Hmm.
the way I'm wording text messages and stuff like that.
Okay.
So, no, I don't believe, like, as a student or even sometimes a colleague or something like that, that people have been able to really tell. And I know myself in particular, I've been very good at hiding it. I've been very good at kind of living that double life
Mm-hmm.
where when I have shared with people, hey, I'm an alcoholic and I've struggled for well over a decade, I get the response of like, you? No way. Come on.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And it's like, no, really, you know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, to give a short answer, I don't think students would have the opportunity to really notice.
Mm. So to dive a little bit deeper here now, not necessarily on the student component, you've talked a lot about your parents and how they've been a huge contributor to seeing how you're showing up, seeing uh, issues that you've had. How has your relationship with them changed over this last decade throughout this recovery process?
Yeah, my parents, I, I'm very fortunate because I have an excellent support system and support network in my recovery journey.
Hmm.
And I hear it in AA all the time. Not everybody has that. Not everybody has a strong support system. And so I'm grateful for the fact that I do. And I can use the word grateful today. 5 years ago, you were never going to hear the word grateful come out of my mouth, right? And
Hmm.
I can use that word today. I'm very grateful, having the perspective now to look back on it. My parents went above and beyond for me my whole life, my entire life. And like I said, addiction runs in the family, so they kind of knew a little bit of, what to look for and whatnot. But they have stood by my side day in and day out. They've never asked me to not come around anymore. Of course, we've had, very hard conversations. Of
Mhm.
course, we've had arguments. Of course, it's gotten ugly at certain times, but never once have they given up on me. And I'm very fortunate and grateful for that because some people do, right? Like, I get it. Like, to be in full disclosure, if I were my parents and I were in their shoes looking at me, I don't know if I would have been able to stand by my side the way that they did. I don't know if I'm strong enough.
Mhm.
And I can admit that today. I wasn't admitting that, years ago, but I can admit that today.
Mhm.
And so I'm super grateful for them. They've always asked me, what can I do to help? They've always been there. At one point as an adult, I had to move back in with them.
Mhm.
I was struggling so much and I had nowhere to go. And, I had to move back in with my parents. And that
Mhm.
was a very humbling thing. But as far as the question is like, how has my relationship with them changed? I think I'm simply just more honest with them than I ever have been. I think it's just as simple as that.
Mhm.
We talk about in AA a lot, honesty, open-mindedness, willingness. Until I'm honest with myself first, I'm really going to have a hard time in this process, but then it's getting honest with other people.
Mhm.
So as the addiction progressed and, I had conversations with my parents, I started being more open of like, here's how I'm drinking, when I'm drinking, here's how I'm hiding it, here's what I'm feeling, here's the emotional side of it, and started opening up about my emotions, have been a tremendous help. And so that's the big deal, right? Like,
Mhm.
I'm not afraid today to share with people how I honestly and truly feel. I wasn't doing that, years ago.
Mhm.
I held everything in and I was going to tell you what you wanted to hear so we could get the conversation over with and I can move on with my life.
Mhm.
And so today I'm not afraid to like share with them, here's where I'm at, good, bad, moderate, whatever the case may be. And that's gone a long way with them being able to kind of trust me a little bit more. And we're closer now more than ever. And that relationship will continue to grow, which I'm excited for. But yeah, it's getting honest and being honest has been by far the biggest change.
So I want to hit you with a tougher question as well while we're on the track of relationships. Do you think that throughout your years of relationships and some that may have ended because of alcoholism, that there is any regret that you may have lost particular people because of alcoholism?
Yeah, I mean, I have lost a lot of people because of alcoholism. It's a tough question to talk about. Lots of friends, lots of girlfriends, even some family members, extended family that like, yeah, we don't have any problems, but they might not necessarily be as close to me. But yeah, when it comes to like relationships, I don't know if I'll have a different answer to this question years down the road.
Hmm.
But yeah, I've had a lot of relationships throughout the years that probably would have went a much different way if it wasn't for my alcohol use, for sure. I wasn't myself throughout all those years. So I never gave the person the true and honest Chris.
Hmm.
They didn't get to really see me in my most natural state. They saw the alcoholic Chris,
Hmm.
basically from my high school girlfriend, really all the way on.
Hmm.
And can I go back and say how different would it have been? Blah, 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 blah. Who knows?
Hmm.
The only thing I can do is say, yes, alcohol tremendously damaged those relationships.
Hmm.
Things probably could have been and would have been a lot different. But with all that being said, I still believe in my spirituality today, and I
Hmm.
believe that there always has been a plan for me,
Hmm.
and those relationships didn't work out for a reason.
Hmm.
And, there's something coming for me in the future that will be bigger and better than I could probably ever imagine, as long as I said before, I just keep doing the next right thing.
Hmm.
So it's a tough question, Shawn, for
Hmm.
sure. I try not to ruminate on it. I try
Hmm.
not to hyper focus on it because the past is the past.
Hmm.
And, just like we talk about in AA, like God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. I can't go back and change those past relationships. And today in my life, I don't really even want to spend a lot of time ruminating on it because I think it takes me out of the present moment.
Hmm.
So yes, things probably would have been a lot different, I'm sure. Who knows where life would have went, but that's not where life went. My higher power had a different plan for me, and I'm very happy in my life today and very happy to continually make progress and trust in, everything's going to happen for a reason, and
Hmm.
trust in the fact that like today I'm right where I need to be. I'm in the spot where I'm supposed to be. I'm doing the things I'm supposed to be from whatever the bigger plan is for me. And I'm simply just trying to use every opportunity along the way, or everything as an opportunity to grow. And if I continue to do that, I'll probably be unrecognizable to people close to me, 5, 10 years from now. And that feels really good. I know my momentum, although it's not always forward. The big picture is I'm moving forward. Sometimes I take 1 or 2 steps back, and then I move forward a little bit more. But the overall average trajectory is moving forward. And I'm certainly more comfortable in my own skin today than I was, even a year ago.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean, you answered the follow-up question that I was going to have of could these relationships be a blessing in disguise in a sense of where you're being guided to, things of that nature. Um, I think the most helpful thing for us to begin to wrap up with is what the future looks like in terms of not necessarily your career, but who you're meant to help and what you want that to look like towards the near future.
Yeah, I mean, I want to help anybody that's struggling with, you know me, you've known me for a long time. I want to
Hmm.
help anybody with anything, of
Hmm.
course, right? Like I am the type of person where, I enjoy being a mentor, I enjoy being a professor, I enjoy being a leader. So anything I can do to help the next person, of course, I'm going to try to do. And that's why I've always enjoyed being the internship coordinator. In my current job, I'm the internship coordinator. But with all that being said, my biggest kind of goal moving forward and challenge is going to be helping people that have struggled with the same things that I've struggled with. And it
Hmm.
doesn't mean that it has to be alcohol. Because,
Hmm.
like I said, I go to some NA meetings. I've been a part of NA, even though I've never really, abused drugs, quote unquote, for example.
Hmm.
Alcohol's been my drug of choice. That doesn't mean, I mean, alcohol is a drug, right? So
Hmm.
let me make sure I'm very clear with that too.
Hmm.
But I want to be able to help people in early recovery. Okay, that is to me the most important thing. Um, because I know how much I struggled in or have struggled in early recovery and how much I had to like start over and stop, start over and stop, start over and stop. So for me, like, yes, hopefully someday I'm a sponsor and I can sponsor other guys that are going through the program. But for me, just like I said I was doing tonight, I want to spend a lot of time in rehabs and detoxes.
Hmm.
I want to spend a lot of time with people that are just coming out of it, maybe a day or two of sobriety, maybe hours, or if you're in a treatment facility, you might have a month, right? Like, I want to help people that are in the real early stages and share with them the mistakes that I've made along the way. So hopefully they don't create or make the same mistakes, or maybe don't make them as much as I did, right? Because just like, as I shared earlier in the podcast, I started my professional career in strength and conditioning, and I was working with athletes, and still to this day in the classroom, I share with students every single day mistakes that I made along the way. I'm very open and transparent about that. So hopefully professionally, students don't make those same mistakes.
Hmm.
That's my goal moving forward in the recovery world. I want to go to as many detoxes, as many hospitals, as many rehab centers as I can, and try to, really touch somebody's heart that are in those programs. Not that you're going to touch everybody's heart,
Hmm.
not that everybody's going to listen, but if just one person listens, right? If one person takes one thing that I said and uses it in their life, then that's a success for me. And that's a that's plenty of reason for me to get off the couch and go there at 7, 8 o'clock at night and go speak at a commitment, to do those types of things. So I'm looking to help people in early sobriety more so than anything else. That's going to be my goal. I would love to do as many podcasts as I possibly can
Hmm.
to share this stuff and raise awareness. I'm also on the board of directors for a company called Revive,
Hmm.
which is an addiction-based company. We go into rehabs and detoxes and treatment centers and sober homes, and basically we help them with fitness and nutrition because that's
Mm.
my main area of expertise. We help them and kind of work them out, talk about nutrition, and kind of deal with the physical aspect of recovery. Because in general, recovery is like a three-pronged thing. It's mind, it's
Hmm.
body, and it's spirit, right? And so being on the board of directors of this company has really helped me, kind of have some sort of a role in people's early recovery on the fitness and nutrition side to use my expertise. But, like I said, to bring it home, early recovery, hospitals, detoxes, sober homes, all that type of stuff. I've been there. I know what it's like. And I know how important it is to go into those places and share. When I was in treatment, to be honest, full disclosure, there were not a lot of good commitments that came in and shared. Most of the people that came in and shared when I was in treatment were essentially bragging about their alcohol and drug use.
Mm.
I did this and I could drink this much and I used this and I knew this person. And, it was like what we call the war stories, not, hey, what are you doing today to improve your life? How do
Mm.
you stay sober? Not what you did in the past. Like,
Mm.
yeah, I want you to briefly give me a general idea of where you're coming from. So that's my take when I go into treatment centers, when I go into hospitals, when I go into an AA meeting or sober homes or anything like that.
Mhm.
I briefly touch on where I got, like how I got to where I am, but most of what I talk about is here's how I've grown. And
Mhm.
here are the things that I did to grow, and hopefully you could take some advice and maybe kind of use it in your own life. That's to me the bottom line of what I'm looking to do right now.
Mm. Yeah. Dr. Swart, well, thank you, like, really for giving me this opportunity to be one of the first ones to really put this onto a platform to share more of this entire story journey that you've been on in terms of even just to help the person that listens to this or um, to give someone just a little bit of exactly what you're talking about, hope. So, is there any just final thoughts that you want to leave everyone off with? This was uh, perfectly done, beautifully said. Um, I have nothing further, but if you want to just leave us off with anything, please feel free.
Yeah, I think for me, there's not much. I think we covered basically as much as we needed to cover. For me, if there's somebody listening to this that's struggling, don't be afraid to just reach out to somebody. Don't be afraid to go to an AA meeting or an NA meeting or something like that. I've never had a bad experience. People are so welcoming. There's so many people there to help. And you don't have to go all the way down to ground zero, like we talked about earlier in this podcast. If you think that you have a problem or somebody that may have a problem, a prerequisite is not losing everything
Mm.
before you kind of make a change.
Mhm.
If you can recognize it and have the awareness is everything. If you're not aware of it, then you're probably never going to get help, because I was never aware of the seriousness of my situation.
Mhm.
As I was a younger kid in my 20s and early 30s, I just wasn't aware of the dangerous situation I was in. So, please reach out to somebody if you're struggling, and don't be afraid to just don't even say anything other than, if you don't know where to start, simply just say the words, I need help. That's it,
Mhm.
right? And let other people kind of start to pick you up from there. And, anytime I speak, whether it be an AA meeting, a rehab center, an institution, or something like that, I always end it with be grateful, stay connected, and stay vigilant, right? If you have an issue, if you're struggling with addiction, gratitude seems to be, at least for me and many people that I hear, kind of the
Mhm.
antidote for addiction. Connection is certainly the opposite of addiction,
Mhm.
being connected with people that are like-minded, but gratitude is just so important. There's something that we talk about in AA, or there's a phrase that we use, a grateful heart will never drink. And the more grateful that I've become for my life and what I have today and where I'm at and what my higher power has given me, the better off I am mentally, just having that gratitude. Staying connected is vital. Every single day, I talk to somebody that is struggling with addiction or has struggled. I
Mhm.
have a sponsor, which I talk to every day. I call
Mhm.
him every night, which is a fantastic thing. So, but if I don't talk to him, I'm either at an AA meeting or I text somebody that maybe I was in recovery with,
Mhm.
whatever the case may be, I'm trying to stay connected and then I'm staying as vigilant as possible. This disease wants me dead, but it'll settle for making me miserable.
Mhm.
And that's an important thing for me to recognize, right? Like if I don't pay attention to my addictive nature and I don't pay attention to my alcoholic tendencies, I'll go right back to where I was in no time. And it can happen very quickly. So I have to stay as vigilant as I possibly can on a regular basis, to keep doing the things that are working for me, that I enjoy doing. Recovery has completely changed my life. I have better
Mhm.
friends today in recovery than I've ever had in my entire life. And that makes me feel really, really good. So those are kind of some of the things that I would close with.
Yeah.
And just recognizing that, it's a challenge. It is not something that happens overnight. And if you stumble and fall, please pick yourself back up and get right back on the horse. I have
Mhm.
stumbled and fallen more times than I want to admit, but I dust myself off, whether I have to go back to treatment. I've been to treatment. I've been to a rehab facility 3 separate times.
Mhm.
There's people out there that have been a lot more than me, but I've picked myself up and I've gone back. If I relapse, the times that I've relapsed, I pick myself up and I get my butt back to an AA meeting. You
Mhm.
know, I I can and will I cannot and will never quit,
Mhm.
right? The day I quit and give up and don't fight this thing anymore, it's gonna take me out. I do recognize the seriousness of the disease that I have. And as a young kid, I didn't recognize it as a fatal and progressive disease. And today I recognize it as a very fatal and progressive disease. This thing wants me out. It wants me dead. And the last thing I'll say is I've already
Mhm.
said this, but I just want to highlight it one more time.
Mhm.
I know that I will always be an alcoholic. AA has taught me that I will always be an alcoholic. Things will never get better, but I
Mhm.
don't have to die an active alcoholic. And if I can
Mhm.
continue to do the things that I'm doing, I can live a happy, joyous, and free life from addiction and not be in my own prison anymore like I was for so long. And then I just want to help the next person along the way. And that's why I'm here, kind of sharing what I've shared. So I appreciate it, Shawn. I really
Mhm.
appreciate the opportunity, to be on your podcast. And you and I have had a great relationship. We've stayed in
Mhm.
touch. And
Mhm.
this has been an excellent opportunity for me to kind of share, my struggles. This is the most formal and in-depth conversation that I've ever had on a podcast or public forum,
Mhm.
to kind of share my experience, strength, and hope. And, I have a lot of gratitude for you, Shawn, to be
Mhm.
able to allow me to come on here, and share this stuff. It's not easy to do. I don't
Mhm.
want
No.
anybody to mistake, the
Mhm.
fact I probably seem very comfortable talking about this stuff, but I'm
Mhm.
certainly not. This is not an easy thing for me to do, especially still in my career and still, a relatively young man that has a lot
Mhm.
of life to live. It's not an easy thing for me to do to come out publicly and share this type of stuff and be vulnerable. But I have recognized at this stage of the game that it is the most important thing for this alcoholic to do. So very grateful,
Mhm.
Shawn. Thank you. I
Yeah.
really
No.
appreciate it.
Thank you, Chris. I really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.